All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're dissecting the mechanics behind a legendary and honestly terrifying supernatural trap known as Black Pine Forest. We're not just swapping spooky campfire tales here, we're actually breaking down a highly structured, incredibly predatory environment that operates on a very strict, very lethal set of rules. We're going to look at exactly how this legend works, how it systematically traps its victims, and what it ultimately teaches us about the psychology of fear itself. So I want you to really think about that for a second. Have you ever heard someone call your name, maybe from the other room or when you're alone in a quiet house, even when absolutely no one was there? It's a pretty universal human experience, right? Just a weird little trick of the brain. But in Black Pine Forest, this everyday auditory illusion is literally weaponized. And this brings us to the absolute core rule of our analysis today. If you hear that voice out there, no matter how real it sounds, never ever answer when the forest calls. Section 1. The Legend of Black Pine. Okay, let's meet our subjects. Adnan, Sikandar, and Hamza, three best friends on a summer camping trip who completely laughed off centuries of local superstition. But the locals actually gave them very explicit warnings before they even set foot on the trail. Rule 1, leave before sunset. Rule 2, never answer if someone calls your name. Naturally, the boys totally ignored these rules. But as they walk deeper in, something changes. The ambient noise, the birds, the insects, it all just simply ceases to exist. They've crossed a threshold into complete, unnatural, dead silence. As the afternoon kind of bleeds into evening, the psychological priming really starts to escalate. They stumble upon this old abandoned campsite featuring a broken wooden sign, and it's got freshly carved words on it, "Don't answer the voice." Hamza just brushes it off as some cheesy horror movie prank. But right at sunset, the ultimate visual cue drops. They discover dozens and dozens of old shoes just hanging from the tree branches. We're talking children's shoes, adult shoes, boots, sandals, the whole shebang. It's a massive, glaring red flag that many, many people have walked into this exact spot and never walked out. And right on cue, an icy wind passes through the trees. Section 2. The Voices in the Dark. Now that it's pitch black, the physical warnings are over and the real psychological warfare begins. The forest doesn't just make generic spooky noises, it creates highly targeted, deeply personal, emotional bait. Just look at the strategy here. Adnan hears his younger sister, Sikandar hears his frightened father begging for help, and Hamza hears the gentle, familiar voice of his late grandmother. The forest is literally testing their emotional vulnerabilities, scanning for the exact right frequency and persona to force a human response. And guys, here is the fatal moment. The whisper for Hamza grows louder, pleading, "Please, I need you." And the emotional weight is just too much. Even with Adnan physically grabbing him and telling him no, Hamza's defense mechanisms completely collapse. Unable to resist the soothing voice of his late grandmother, his lips tremble. And he breaks the primary rule, whispering back, "Grandma, where are you?" The consequences of breaking that rule are just instantaneous and violently chaotic. The very second Hamza replies, the campfire literally explodes. The wind starts screaming through the trees, and every single hanging show in the canopy begins violently swinging all at once. Amidst this massive sensory overload, Hamza's eyes just go completely empty. He stands up, walks blankly out into the pitch-black darkness, and vanishes completely. All that is left of him is his glowing flashlight sitting in the dirt. For hours, Adnan and Sikandar search those dark woods, desperately shouting for their friend. But their terrifying reality is quickly reduced to a single number, 1. They find exactly one set of fresh footprints belonging to Hamza. But here's the crazy part. Those footprints completely defy physical logic. They walk right into the middle of an empty clearing and simply end. There's no sign of a struggle, no continuation of the path. It's as if he literally evaporated into thin air. Just as they're trying to process this impossible disappearance, the forest completely shifts tactics. Heavy footsteps suddenly sound directly behind them in the dark. Crunch, crunch, crunch. But every single time they spin around in a total panic, flashlight beams cutting through the trees, there is absolutely nothing there. The forest is making absolutely sure they know they are being hunted. Section 3. The 1974 Ranger Diary. Sunrise finally brings this false sense of security as the boys stumble onto an abandoned ranger cabin, and inside they find a diary from 1974 that just strips away all the mystery. It explicitly documents exactly how this environment operates. The forest works almost like a recording device, learning the names and emotional tethers of anyone who crosses its borders. This confirms exactly what happened to Hamza. It isn't a ghost, it's a highly evolved predatory mechanism. When someone answers, the forest keeps them forever. And the diary ends with this final, absolutely blood-curdling sentence, revealing the true absolute rule of survival. It's not just about ignoring the voices. It is about total, absolute silence when the sun goes down. This realization makes the boys' blood just run cold, because now they know exactly what they're up against, and they know they have to escape right now. Moving into Section 4, the final call. The boys abandon the cabin and just absolutely sprint for the road, but the forest deploys its most devastating trap yet. A voice cries out from the trees, and it's Hamza. Now, this brilliantly illustrates the fatal split in logic that the forest relies on. The voice cries out, "Guys, I'm over here, please don't leave me!" Sikandar is operating purely on emotional belief here. His best friend is alive, terrified, and needs an immediate rescue. Adnan, on the other hand, is relying on cold, hard logic. Hamza is gone, and the forest is simply wearing his voice like a mask. Tragically, Sikandar's emotions win. He completely ignores Adnan's warnings and bolts back into the deep woods to save his friend. Adnan is screaming after him, but it's way too late. The mimicry of Hamza's voice abruptly stops. The woods fall right back into that terrifying, unnatural silence. And then, Sikandar screams. Just once. After that, nothing. Adnan is now completely, entirely alone. Section 5. The Aftermath. Adnan does the only thing a person can do in that situation. He runs for his life, escapes the forest, and immediately contacts the authorities. But when the police launch a full-scale search, their findings are deeply chilling. There are no bodies. Those abruptly ending footprints? Completely gone. The campsite? Vanished. The forest systematically erased every single piece of physical evidence that the boys were ever even there. It leaves the authorities with absolutely nothing to go on. Well, almost nothing. The search party recovers exactly one item, that old broken wooden sign the boys found on their first night. But there is a horrific twist here. The warning to not answer the voice? It's gone. Instead, the sign now has 3 fresh names perfectly carved into the wood. Hamza, Sikandar, and Adnan. Even though Adnan survived and was standing right there with the police, the forest had officially claimed his name too. And that brings us to a really chilling realization about how this trap operates. What you absolutely need to take away from this is that the hunt doesn't necessarily end at the tree line. Because every single night, while lying in the supposed safety of his own bed, miles and miles away from Black Pine, Adnan hears a whisper outside his bedroom window. A soft, gentle, deeply familiar voice calling his name. He just closes his eyes and remembers the rule. He knows he can never, ever reply. But the voice continues to call him every single night, just waiting for one tiny moment of weakness. It really forces us to ask ourselves, if you heard the voice of someone you desperately loved crying out for help in the dark, night after night, how long could you really hold your tongue? So, keep the anatomy of this legend in mind. If the trees ever call your name, do not answer, because the forest is always waiting.